A successful State of the Union address can give a president's agenda a strong push forward. I'm joined by someone who is very familiar with the concept, Thomas Mack McLarty, who served as President Clinton's chief of staff. Mr. McLarty, welcome to Bloomberg's Bottom Line. Good to have you on.
Delighted to be here with you,
Your
Mark.
friend Ken Duberstein was just on, and we talked about tone. We'll get to that in just a second. But in that string of sound bites we saw from President Obama, in one towards the end, he said the trend is clear. Has that trend been made clear enough for the American people? The administration says we are seeing slow but steady growth, but we're hearing reports that Wall Street bonuses are on the rise. Some banks are making record profits. What about Main Street?
Not yet. The trend is not clear enough yet to Main Street and to the majority of Americans. You really need to have stability first, a restoration of hope, and then an optimism, a sense of confidence about the future. That's what the president's got to do tonight, or at least begin to do.
How do they get that stability you spoke of?
Well, I think, frankly, Mark, some very serious and substantive, important steps have been taken in that regard, and the president has probably not gotten enough credit for that. I do think we looked into the proverbial abyss in a downturn here that was unprecedented since the Great Depression. So I think if you look back from that point forward, things are better, both from a statistical standpoint and from a market standpoint, a job standpoint. But there's still far too much unemployment and underemployment in this country.
Are Americans impatient?
Well, I think they're anxious. They're concerned about their future and their families, Mark. I think that's quite natural. But yes, I think by nature, Americans are impatient. We've had a good run at it. We had a good run at it in the Clinton years, as you well know. But that's not an entitlement. You have to work at that, and you're going to have some ups and downs in any economy, particularly in this increasingly interconnected global economy.
I was speaking to Mr. Duberstein, and we were talking about, he spoke of President Reagan and President Clinton's ability to reach across the aisle to get the job done. How does Barack Obama reach across the aisle when he is up against what has been made known by some on the Republican side of the aisle as an unwillingness to work with this president?
Shrewd decisions and move to the center. I think he's got a good playbook that he used at the end of last year when he did find common ground in a pretty hostile environment after the midterm elections with the Republicans. He reached consensus on the tax bills and other measures, including the all-important START treaty, and that gave him, I think, a tailwind going into this year.
But then there's that health care reform. A lot of folks are still upset about health care reform. A lot of the leaders of the Republican Party have said that President Obama and the Democrats, led by Nancy Pelosi, jammed health care reform through, and their sentiment was, if it's going to be like that, then we're just not going to work with you on other things. Can there be bipartisanship in this town between this president and this Congress?
Yes, I believe there can be. It won't be easy, but it's doable. And the reason I am hopeful, I would stop short of optimistic, but hopeful, is the American people really don't want to hear a lot about partisan politics and excuses.
They're demanding that something get done.
You've got it.
Not asking, demanding that something get done.
Bingo. And that's what the midterm elections were about in many ways. This is a different time and place, Mark, when you mentioned about health care. I think the president did expend a lot of capital on health care. We'll see how that health care reform ultimately works out. Was it capital that should have been spent perhaps later rather than sooner? In my judgment, respectfully, perhaps, yes. But hindsight's always a perfect substitute for wisdom. But I think the American people are focused very clearly, and frankly were at the beginning of the president's term, on the economy and on jobs. I think the president took some very significant measures to stabilize the economy. I give him very high marks for that. But I think there wasn't the sharp, laser-like focus on job creation and American competitiveness. How do you create?
Was he getting the wrong advice from people?
Oh, I don't know that I would Monday morning quarterback it in that way. Healthcare reform healthcare is such a big portion of our economy. It's 1/6 plus of our economy, Mark, and you can't do much about, or as much as you need to do about this deficit without some control of healthcare costs, including Medicare and Medicaid. I think the president looked at it as a holistic approach, but I think in doing so, and I think Ken Duberstein alluded to this, it's pretty easy to get caught up in legislative accomplishments as opposed to actions that connect with the American people.
Well, the president's domestic policy advisor, Melody Barnes, was telling me about some of the things that the president may be speaking about tonight in the State of the Union, and she spoke of investment in education, investment in infrastructure, and a lot of the Republican leaders say investment is just a code word for spending more money. How do you balance the need to invest in this country's future, educate our young people so that they are the leaders of tomorrow, and at the same time control spending that everyone agrees has gotten to a point where it is jeopardizing the future of this nation?
Well, Mark, not at all to be self-serving or to give kudos to President Clinton inappropriately, but I think we did a pretty good job in terms of cutting in certain places, yet increasing expenditures in the other, and bringing down the deficit and moving toward, indeed, a surplus.
Was that because you had a willing partner in the Republican Party?
Partially. We had some disagreement in the beginning, but as time went on, we achieved more and more bipartisan common ground victories. That's important.
Mr. McLarty, I asked Mr. Duberstein what Wall Street doesn't want to hear tonight. What does Wall Street want to hear tonight?
Well, I think they want to see an emphasis on growing our economy, a realistic approach to government spending and how we're going to begin to get this deficit under control. There's no question they want certainty in both economic policy and in regulation. I don't think it's realistic for the business community to expect no oversight of regulation, but they do deserve balanced, thoughtful, purposeful regulation.
All right, Mack McLarty, the Chief of Staff to former President Bill Clinton, joining us here in Washington. Mr. McLarty, it's a pleasure. Thanks, sir.
Great being with you, Mark.
Thank you very much.